You're dead.
You done, son?
Come on, baby diver. Let's see what you got.
Come on.
Come on. See you later, bitch. Stupid assholes. I wish I could scare them all to death. What the hell are you?
I am the Trickster, and if you believe, you'll have your revenge this All Hallows Eve.
The Terror of Hallows Eve, the first half hour of the film is based on events that actually happened to me when I was about 14 years old, being bullied by some very unnice people. And then after that, it turns into a nightmare of creatures and monsters, and I really wanted the film to be an homage to the old 80s films. I was raised on John Carpenter and Wes Craven and all the great films, you know, of the early 80s, and I really wanted to make sure that the film had that vibe about it, and the creatures and everything about it, and the music and everything had that 1980s kind of a vibe. And it's a little bit like Stranger Things, but with a lot more monsters.
Yeah. So what do you think, obviously that 80s vibe that you touched on there, what do you think it is about that is really sort of appealing to people at the moment? Because there's a lot of films, TV shows that are sort of dialing into that period, isn't there?
Well, in the 80s was a big turning point for horror, because before the 80s, you didn't have videos. So basically any film that came out would either just be in the theater or be on cable. And there was a couple of films that came out in the 70s that were amazing films, like Halloween and Star Wars and Jaws, and that kind of, for me, I think, started the ball rolling. But as soon as the 80s came in, and you had DVDs and VHS, or not DVDs, you had VHSs came out, and so a lot of films were being made, and there was a lot of stuff that hadn't been done yet. So the 80s really, in my opinion, kind of set the pace for a lot of horror, and now it's kind of hard to make a horror movie and not have it be similar to something else. So I just feel like the 80s just had the best movies, music, everything from the 80s for me was just the best it's been for me.
Obviously you've got a background in visual effects. Has that helped at all in moving to be a director? You know, you see people like Greg Nicotero who's moving from visual effects into directing. Is this just like a burning desire inside every special effects artist, or something you've always wanted to do?
Yeah, I don't know about that. I moved to Los Angeles from Northern California in 1990, and I had this master plan that I was going to move to LA. I was going to start learning how to do makeup effects. I was lucky enough to my first film that I worked on as an effects artist was Hook with Steven Spielberg, and worked on Dracula and Mrs. Doubtfire and a bunch of great films. But I had a master plan that when I came down, I would start doing effects first. I wanted to get into acting and play some of the creatures, and then eventually get to the point where I was writing and directing my own content. So I had this plan, and it took me about 10 to 15 years to get everything in place. But for me, it's been a great experience, because I understand what it's like to play a creature. I understand what it's like to put somebody in makeup. I understand a lot of the different avenues of making a film by watching people like Spielberg and Coppola at firsthand, being on set. So every time I would go on set as a makeup artist, I would sit there and focus in on the director and just watch how they direct and how they interact with people and how they inspired people, and then just took all of that and then put it into my own version of directing. And then the first film that I directed was a family film called Monster Mutt that we did about 7 years ago. And it just feels really natural for me. I love directing. It's one of my favorite things to do.
Okay. You touched on the personal experience at the start, about how the film is from your own personal experience.
Yeah.
Obviously that ties into quite a strong anti-bullying theme in
yeah.
the film. Was that important to you to get in there and really push across?
Yeah, because in the story I basically show what happened to me when I was 14, and it was, I was 14 and the kids that beat me up were like 18, 19 years old, and it was just a huge gap difference of age, and I was a little guy and they were like full-grown men almost. And when it happened, it was pretty traumatizing, but I kind of let it go. I didn't let it rule my life or anything. And then a few years back, my daughter, who was a freshman in high school, started getting bullied, and that brought it all back. And that's when I started writing the script and going, okay, this is pissing me off now, because now bullying is such a big thing. It's such a big social thing too, because now, back when I was younger, bullying meant a bigger guy would come up to you and punch you and beat you up or intimidate you. Now you can bully online, you can bully social, on social media, all this stuff. It's really kind of out of control. So if there's any message that I have from this movie, it is not, let me put it out there, it is not, if you've been bullied, try to summon a supernatural demon to kill your bullies. That is not the message. The message is really, if there is one, is that if you've been bullied, don't let it affect your life. Don't let it dictate who you are.
Okay. The Trickster character in the film was really a nice balance between kind of creepy, but also you sort of liked him a little bit. He's a little bit cute as well.
Yeah.
Did you go through a lot of different character designs for that, or did you kind of nail it first try?
Well, the movie has probably about a dozen different creatures in it, and I'd say about 8 or 9 of the creatures are puppets, and then a few makeups. And the Trickster actually started off as an animatronic puppet, and we shot the whole movie and edited it, and I just felt like the puppet didn't connect as much as I wanted it to with the lead character, and it was really important that that puppet really, or that character, the Trickster, really sold the film. And I just didn't feel like it was there yet. So we had Doug Jones, who's a friend of mine, who's the world's greatest creature performer in the world. He was playing one of the other characters in the film for us, a character called Scarecrow, and he did such a great job that everyone was commenting about how great that character was, And I went to my producer, Ron Halvis, and I was like, hey, we got a big problem. We got to fix the Trickster, and I think the only way to fix it is to put Doug Jones in a makeup that looks similar to the puppet and then put him into the film. And once we put Doug into the makeup and we saw what we were getting, it was so clear that that was the right move. And then what we did was Doug's about 6'4". We shot him against green screen and shrunk him down to about 4 feet tall, and then made his eyes digitally bigger, and then basically put his image right over the top of where we had shot the puppet. So we actually, it was the last thing that we put into the film, but it literally, for me, is one of the coolest characters I've seen. And you're right, it actually starts off kind of sympathetic because he's trying to trick the kid into making the deal with him. And we had to come up with something that we felt like somebody would actually trust enough to do that. So we had to make him feel, like you would trust him. So that was a little bit tricky there.
Towards in the kind of epilogue for the film, there's it's set in Haddonfield mental institution. There's also a scene in there where the girl was trapped in the cupboard with the Louvre doors, which seemed very similar to the scene in Halloween.
Yes, absolutely.
Those was it something you were trying to? I mean, obviously it's not subtle.
It's an exact. I mean, I literally tried to light it the same.
Yeah.
I'm such a huge John Carpenter fan. I mean, Halloween is the reason why I'm here.
Okay.
And I wanted to pay homage to him, and I remember that scene in the movie being like the scariest thing I had ever seen as a kid. And when Jamie Lee Curtis is sitting in that closet and he comes busting in, my heart as a kid actually beat so hard that I thought I was having a heart attack. And I just remember that. I wanted to recreate something similar to that. And so that's why we had that one scene. And also at the same time, we had worked with John Carpenter's wife, Sandy King, a few years earlier. And I reached out to her, and I never thought this would ever happen, but I reached out to her and I said, I know John has these new CDs that he's touring called The Lost Themes. Is there any chance at all John would let me put a couple songs into the film? I never expected her to ever say yes, and the next day she called back and said, John said, you're good to do it. And I literally jumped out of my seat, because that's like the stamp of approval from the god of horror, to put, and he doesn't let anyone use his music, so I thought it was a true honor to have him in the mix.
Okay, so do you think you're gonna stay with directing? Are you gonna do visual effects or do everything, jack of all trades?
Well, what we're doing right now is we're actually taking our company Illusion Industry and we're dividing it down the middle. What's happening is we are creating content. We are scripting The Terror 2. Right now we have a television series, a supernatural television series that we're pitching. So we have multiple content that I will be directing and producing, and my partner Ron will be producing also. And then our company, the effects company Illusion Industries, will create obviously all the creatures and all the monsters for all the different stuff we do. But we also have it divided so that we are going to continue doing the makeup effects for the studio films. My involvement in doing the makeup effects will probably be less and less as we move forward, and I'll just continue directing and creating content.
Okay. So you've got the film screens tonight, the ultimate film of Frightfest. How do you feel about that?
I'm excited because other than the cast and crew screening that we had, no one has seen this film. A few press people who were doing interviews have seen it, but so far the response that I have gotten from people who have seen it, and I've directed a few films, and I know when people are being genuine and when they're, you know, kissing your butt. No one's kissing my butt, and everyone really is identifying with this film, and people love the 80s genre. So not only did I hit it with, you know, the real story of the bullying, which is tagging to a lot of people because so many people have been bullied and kind of identified with the real story part of it. But then as soon as we get to the creatures and the monsters, we just threw everything in the mix that we had just to make sure it was a visual, you know, extravaganza. So we're really happy with this film, and I can't wait to see an audience who really has no idea what to expect. And we haven't, the trailer that we have online doesn't show any of the creatures. It shows a tiny bit of the Trickster, so no one has a clue what they're about to sit down and watch. So I can't wait to see the chaos come on the screen and just watch everybody's eyes go big. I'm totally excited.